Here at L4 Media, we talk high school football, 4A, 3A, and 2A in Texas. We talk East Texas sports. We talk NFL, guy talk, movie, and booze. We also talk wrestling and so much more. So like and subscribe and check us out.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Texas Two-Seam podcast, part of Outdrink the Coverage on L4 Media. My name is Ryan Fox. Happy to be with you here again for episode 2, and want to give a huge thanks to everyone who tuned into episode 1. We got over 1,000 views on the L4 Media YouTube channel, so thanks to everyone for tuning in last week. And again, another shout to Jared Sandler, Rangers broadcaster, for joining us on the inaugural episode last week as well. Again, all positive feedback, both on YouTube, email, and on the Texas Rangers fans only Facebook page, which again, one of the fastest growing Ranger fan groups on the internet, the Texas Rangers fans only Facebook page. Again, Aaron and Tracy, they do a great job running that page. Be sure to join it, man. They just hit 7,000 members on the Facebook page. So again, that's the Texas Rangers fans only Facebook page. We'll link that in the description below. So be sure to join the fastest growing Rangers fan community on Facebook, Texas Rangers fans only. I want to give a quick shout again to our sponsor of the podcast, Car Motor Company, located at 302 South Caddo in historic downtown Cleburne, your number one place for classic and late model cars, trucks, SUVs, convertibles, everything you need over there at Car Motor Company. Again, you can reach them via phone at 817-666-1111 or visit their website to keep up with their ever-changing inventory at www.txcar.com. That's www.txkar.com. Again, thank you for joining us today. A loaded show here again in episode 2. We'll have L4 Media and Outdrink the Coverage's Terry Bennett joining us on the show today to give some insight on the Rangers season so far. Again, really great start for the Rangers. They're sitting at 6-2 atop the AL West, and we're recording this on Sunday, and the Rangers have taken the first 2 games from their 4-game home series against Houston. So, of course, love to see that as well. And we have a lot of topics to dive into outside of the Rangers' hot start as well. We'll talk about the Major League Baseball Player Association's kind of, I guess you would say, a backlash with the Tommy John injuries. We've already hit 9 so far in 2024, and we're not even 2 weeks in. And the MLBPA, Players Association, is kind of blaming that on the pitch clock. So we'll dive into that and see if there's any correlation between the pitch clock and the quick surge of the Tommy John injury so far during the 2024 season. Of course, we'll recap the Rangers Tampa series from earlier last week and some of the injuries that have come from that, and an injury that came from Saturday night's Rangers 7-2 victory over the Astros at home. We'll dive into that and what the potential roster moves could be if one of those guys is put on the IL. Are there any huge potential minor league players that could be called up and make a significant impact with the Rangers right away? So we'll talk about that as well. Of course, the first no-hitter thrown in the 2024 season was earlier last week with the Astros. Ronel Blanco, he pitched a no-hitter against the Toronto Blue Jays at home in their 3-game series with them, which we will talk about later on in the show. We'll give an update on the AL West standings. Of course, the Rangers on top of the AL West currently with their 6-2 record heading into Sunday evening's matchup with the Astros, which we'll dive into that one as well, and a lot of other topics. We'll get to your fan questions from the Texas Rangers fans only Facebook page as well. So that's all up ahead right here on Texas Two-Seam, part of Outdrink the Coverage on L4 Media. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, it'll be myself, Ryan Fox, and Terry Bennett to bring you episode 2 of the Texas Two-Seam podcast. Car Motor Company is your destination for classic and late model vehicles in north central Texas, located at 302 South Caddo in downtown Cleburne. They have everything you're looking for, from classic cars and trucks to late model cars and trucks, convertibles, and SUVs. If you'd like to call ahead of your visit, they can be reached at 817-666-1111. With inventory changing weekly, there's a little bit of everything at Car Motor Company. Be sure to visit the website www.txcar.com. That's www.txkar.com to keep up with their ever-changing inventory. They're open from 9 to 5:30 on Tuesday through Friday, and at 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock on Saturdays, closed Sunday and Monday. And also, if you mention this advertisement and Texas 2-Seam during your next visit to Car Motor Company, they'll give you $200 off any vehicle purchase. Stop by Car Motor Company while you shop and eat in historic downtown Cleburne. Again, you can give them a call at 817-666-1111 or visit their website at www.txcar.com. That's www.txkar.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Texas 2-Seam podcast, part of Outdrink the Coverage on L4 Media. My name is Ryan Fox, and joining me today, part of L4 Media and Outdrink the Coverage, is Mr. Terry Bennett. Terry, how are you doing today, sir?
Hey, man, I'm excited. The Rangers, outside of maybe an injury or two, depending on Josh Sports, you got to like where they're at to start this season. We're recording this on Sunday morning, so right now the Astros and Rangers, the Rangers have taken the first two. Now, I'm the type, when I go into a 4-game, I just want to, want to split. But when you win the first two, that kind of changes your expectations, I think.
Yeah, I think so for sure, especially with, Houston being as heated as a rivalry as it is. And another thing to think about is how dominant the Astros have been in Arlington the last couple of years, especially since they opened up that new stadium. But here are the Rangers now, despite the injuries, taking the first two of this 4-game series.
And I know it's really early in the season, but the Astros just don't look right. Oddly enough, they're 2-7. Their 2 wins is a shutout and a no-hitter. But other than that, even in the first 2 games of this series, I don't see any of that fire. It doesn't feel like a rivalry right now from the Astros side. And maybe part of that's the veterans and they're going to figure it out. But if I'm an Astro fan, there's not a lot to be happy about this first, 10 games of the season outside of the no-hitter.
No, they have the same record as Oakland right now. And if you're an Astros fan, I can't imagine you're too happy about that. The same amount of wins as Oakland. They're both tied for last place in the AL West right now. And that's not something that Astros fans, at least of late, that's not a position they're used to being in. And it's probably just down times right now. But again, you're only 9 games through the season up to this point. And when you have guys like Altuve and Yordan Alvarez, there's a good chance you'll figure that out. I think their biggest thing right now is pitching, especially in the bullpen. They're just having a tough time trying to figure it out, at least early on.
Yeah, and so you look at where the Texas Rangers were about 2015, 2016, especially 2015. Still a playoff team, still really good, but they weren't where they were in 2010 and 2011, and that's because the Rangers and the Astros are just like this. They're not going to spin like the Yankees or the Red Sox or the Dodgers, and so they had kind of burnt through their draft capital, burnt through their farm capital, and they were at the back end of depth. And I think that's where you're seeing the Astros right now. They're 9 and 3 pitchers can beat anybody, but once you get past that, that's where they start to struggle. And it's just, it feels like it's the last legs of this dynasty. Now, that doesn't mean they can't turn it around. And I still think they're going to be there at the end of the day. But I do think you're starting to see this Astro dynasty, and it was a dynasty, dynasty kind of to wind down because, again, the Rangers, they're not teams that are going to spend like the Dodgers, the Yankees, and just 200, 300 million tax thing be damn. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit with the Rangers with some of their pitching stuff. But yeah, it does feel like the Astros have got to figure something out.
Yeah. And again, like you said, they're not big spenders. I think their 2 biggest acquisitions as far as money spent the last 2 years was probably before last season with Jose Abreu, when they signed him from the White Sox, and then they just signed Josh Hader. in this past offseason. And again, that's one of those early on things. We mentioned the bullpen struggles. Josh Hader in that closing role. I mean, he's got a blown save or two so far this season as well. Again, I think he's one of those players that he's good enough, and I think this roster is good enough that they'll figure it out eventually. But I think you're right. I think they're on the kind of the waning end, the last leg, like you mentioned, of this dynasty that they've had. And I agree, it is a dynasty. They've only had 2 World Series runs, but you look at 4 American League pennants in like a 6-year span. That's nothing to turn your head about.
Oh no, and I know for Ranger fans, sometimes you don't want to acknowledge your rival. Again, I'm a little different. I grew up in East Texas. I was actually growing up a fan of both teams. So I respect what the Astros did. Yeah, they did the thing where they bombed their seasons for 3 years and got draft picks. But the biggest thing people don't understand is even doing that, they then drafted correctly, and that's the second part of the whole. If you tank for better draft position, you still got to hit those drafts, and especially in baseball, because baseball. I know Wyatt Langford has shown, him being a top 4 pick, he's ready to go. That's rare. Look at Leiter and Rockner for the Rangers. You tell anybody 5 years ago that one staff would get those two, they'd be like, oh man, by 2024, that's your number 1 and your number 2 right there. And y'all are rocking. And both of them are struggling. And they were good draft picks, but they were both struggling right now to get back or to get up to the majors. So yeah, they tanked, but you got to respect the drafting.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at guys like, the Rangers, they drafted players like Josh Young, and then they drafted Wyatt Langford last year. Wyatt Langford has the second longest rise from going through the minor league system up until making their major league debut. I think he played through all levels from low A all the way up to triple A. I think he played like 60-something games.
That was 44.
Oh, it's 44. Okay, well, that's even less as well.
I might be wrong there. But yeah, it's him, John Allroot, and Pete Incavilla, former Ranger, who basically told Montreal that I'm going straight to the pros and you're going to trade me. And they did. Maybe that's why Montreal doesn't have a franchise anymore, listening to the players like that. But yeah, but let's look at that. Those are 2 good draft picks because the Rangers were drafting in the top 5. It's way easier to draft in the top 5 than it is the bottom 5. But even again, in baseball, being in the top 5, it just doesn't guarantee a time clock like other sports. A top 5 NFL player, unless it's a quarterback that you're needing to season, they're going to be playing immediately. Top 5 in basketball, they're going to be playing immediately. Baseball, it might be 4 or 5 years, and they still turn out to be a good pro.
Yeah, and an example of that could pan out like that is Jack Leiter. I think they drafted him in 21 or 22, something like just a couple years ago, and he's still trying to find his way through the minor league system of the Rangers. And he's had a good start at AAA Round Rock as well. I could see him getting called up later sometime this season. I don't know if it'll be in a starting role. It could end up being sort of a long reliever role, kind of just depending on where the need is for the Rangers with their arms later in the season. But yeah, that's an example of a potentially really good player that takes some time to develop in the minors. And then again, on the other side of the spectrum, guys like Evan Carter and Wyatt Langford, who have made the jump so quickly. And not only that, they've made significant impacts for this team ever since they've been called up.
I'll tell you what, it's funny because I was going to talk about Evan Carter, and I was assuming he was going to still be where he was before the Astros series, where he hadn't got a hit, but he'd been on base and he'd scored runs. And then in the first 2 games of the Astros, the hits are coming. But I've been impressed with the fact that he wasn't getting hits, yet he was getting on base. And we don't, in today's baseball, that gets lost. It's not like it used to be where that was something that was spotlighted. Now it's all about the home run. It's all about analytics and everything. And you kind of lose the guys like Evan Carter, who in 5 games can not have a hit, but have walked 6 times and scored 3 runs. That's impressive to me.
Yeah, I agree. And then, you don't see that typically in a bunch of young players, the discipline to sit in there in the box and take pitches and not chase and draw those walks. We've seen Wyatt Langford do the same thing as well. He's drawn some walks, but on top of that, he's been getting the hits as well. So, but yeah, for Evan Carter, it was one of those things like, yeah, he was 0 for 18, 0 for 16, whatever he was, but you knew he was going to pick it up, especially when you look at the fact that he was still getting on base, drawing walks, and then just coming around to score. He had 6 walks and 5 runs scoring that 0 for 18 span. And now he's got 4 or 5 hits to these first 2 Astros games. I mean, it took a little while, probably about a week or so for him to get adjusted. But all players go through a slump, and a slump for Evan Carter. You're still getting on base and scoring 5 runs.
Exactly.
But yeah, but just players like them are special, and I think that's what has Rangers fans, like especially me, like so excited for the future of this team. You have this young core of players. Of course, you got Corey Seager and you got Marcus Semien. You got them for a long time with their contracts. But this young core of players with it, Josh Young, Evan Carter, Wyatt Langford, Leody Taveras, the guy they drafted, all these younger players that have stepped up so far. It's just a really exciting time to be a Ranger fan.
Well, and this is a good time to transition to, you talk about that, and you, especially when you have a 3-core like that with Young, Langford, and Carter, you have to remember the odds that all 3 flourish and become consistent all-stars. That's rare. And part of that is injuries. And it's starting to look like Josh Young might be one of those that just can't buy a break. He's buying 2 breaks, one last year, one this year. Not only did he fracture his wrist, they first said it was going to be 6 weeks. Then they went in like, oh no, it's worse than we thought. It's going to be 8 to 10 weeks. I'm a little concerned, and I don't mean like as a baseball fan. I mean as a fan of Josh Young. I'm concerned where he's at mentally, because he talked about it this week, and it's very fresh. But man, he just felt defeated. You could just tell. He talked about Kobe and tearing his, and then you could just tell he's just really frustrated, because these are injuries you can't do anything about. I mean, it's not like self-inflicted. Getting hit by the ball, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, exactly. And then, with that thing as well, with Josh Young and the injury, that you're right. They said that it's going to be, it was worse than they initially thought it was going to be. With a timetable of 8 to 10 weeks to return, I mean, with this injury, he can't even throw for at least 6 weeks. So it's going to take him some time, even when he's been given the okay to start just simply throwing and swinging the bat again. It's going to take him probably weeks just to get used to seeing these pitches and getting at bats and getting back into the rhythm that he was. Because that first week he was here, he was on a tear. He was on a tear during that Cubs series, and then the games he played in Tampa before the injury, he was on a tear. He had 2 home runs, like 5 or 6 RBIs on the plate and defensively. That there's going to be sort of a hole at that third base slot now for this Rangers defense, because he was just an enforcer there at third base and barely letting any balls get by him and just making strong throws to first base. It's going to be a tough loss for the Rangers, and especially for Josh Young. I can understand how that can affect him mentally, because he's already gone through this thing before, because he fractured his thumb towards, like, I can't remember when in the season it was. I think it was after the All-Star break.
Yeah,
when he fractured his thumb in Miami. And then he wasn't able to come back until August.
And he would have won the Rookie of the Year if that wouldn't have happened.
Absolutely. And the same thing with Corey Seager. He would have won American League MVP if he didn't miss 60 games with the injuries he had as well. But for Josh Young, man, you got to feel for him. And he was emotional during that press conference as well, I can imagine. But I think he really does have a strong mental fortitude. I think he'll come back stronger from this. But it's just one of those things, again, when you can't even at least throw for 6 or 7 weeks, it's going to take a time physically to get back to the level that he was at. And of course, that will take its toll on him mentally as well. But I think he's a good enough player. I think he'll come back from this. It'll tough to at least immediately get back to the tear he was on to start the season. But I think he'll be back to where he's supposed to be probably in July or so. I think he'll start getting back in the swing of things.
Well, and this is one of those things where an injury at one place can have a ripple effect. You brought up the fact that him throwing, you got to have a feeling that when he first comes back, he'll probably DH. So then does that mean you're going to be taking bats away from Wyatt Langford? Because, I mean, right now, it was a perfect vacuum of needing a DH is the reason why Wyatt Langford's up. If it wasn't for that, Langford would be either in AAA or AA simply to get bats, because he wouldn't have enough bats here. Because where are you going to put him in that lineup right now? So you get Josh Young hurt, and I'm like you, I assume that he's going to probably come back swinging before he's really ready to, fully throw. And so you're going to want him to have bats. And so that's where all this one injury at third base, which seems, okay, that sucks, but they're deep enough to handle it, which they are. Justin Fosco got brought up. You still got Ezekiel Duran, who defensively has got a live arm. He's really good. He struggles at the plate, but inside this offense, you can hide that for 8 weeks. But again, the issue is going to be when he comes back, where does he fit in, and does that take bats away from Wyatt Langford? And as you talked about, Langford has looked very comfortable at the plate. You can they were talking about it in that first game, how on ESPN, this is a rookie, and it was in that, I think it was in the bottom of the ninth or the bottom of the 10th. I think it was the bottom of the 10th. And he, the very first pitch was what you literally call a bait pitch. The pitch, and it was a smart pitch to a rookie in a key situation. You throw that outside as it darts outside, and you want him to go for it. And Langford not only took it, but he looked comfortable. And that, the announcer said, and I even thought, wow, that he does not look like a rookie. Wyatt Langford does not look like a rookie at the plate all, through spring training and through the first 10 games of the season. And I just don't want bats taken away from him.
Yeah, and I agree completely. And that plate discipline is something that Chris Young even talked about when they're, with the draft with Wyatt Langford. The batting average and the offensive stats were there. He was batting over 500 during his senior year with Florida, which he led them to the Men's College World Series final. He was just a tear at the plate, but again, the batting average was high as well, but the on-base percentage was there because he also drew a lot of walks. He has the plate discipline of a veteran player, like you mentioned.
You know what? I want to say this. So far, this team has done a good job at taking walks. They're seventh in the league, and they've only played 8 games, and everybody around them has played 9, 10, and 11. And we didn't see that a lot last year. There would be good spurts. Now, some of that might be, who they're facing pitching, and they're just being wild early. But still, the thing that I've been impressed with this offense in totality so far is last year at times it felt like it got station to station home runs. Right now they're second in the league in batting average at 300. They've got 3 triples already on the year. They're second in the league in doubles. I like seeing that because you're going to have stretches, no matter how great your offense is, you're going to have power outages through the season. People are tired. You're just facing pitching that's knowing how to pitch you well. And so being able to move the runners when you're not hitting home runs, I think that just makes this offense even better.
Yeah, and the offense is it doesn't seem like they've skipped a beat from the offensive production that they had last year. I think adding a guy like Wyatt Langford and how quickly he's just adjusted to the major league level helps a lot with that as well. And again, losing Josh Young will hurt that significantly. But the pitching as well for the Rangers, that's something was a big question mark and probably still is. But when you look at some of those young guys who kind of came up last year, a guy I want to talk about is Cody Bradford. Bradford, when he pitched Friday night, was phenomenal. He pitched 7 2/3 innings. He had only given 2 hits and 1 run, and that run was really given up when he came out, and Yerry Rodriguez gave up that hit as well. But still, he was responsible for the runner on. But he did a phenomenal job. 4 strikeouts, no walks, 7 2/3 innings. You don't see many starting pitchers in Major League Baseball this way go into the 8th inning. It's very rare, just because whether it's something they want to keep him at a pitch count or analytics, whatever the case may be, especially a younger guy like Cody Bradford, who has struggled in the past, but through 2 starts, he's done very well so far.
Well, again, let's talk about Wyatt Langford in his first at bat. Let's go to Bradford's first start this year against the Cubs, and it started pretty rocky. Gave up a couple hits, gave up a run, and it looked like, okay, he's probably not gonna last long. I think it was 2 in the second or 2 in the third, and then he settled down. And again, that's impressive to me. You know how a young baseball player reacts to adversity, because being a young baseball player up into the pros, usually your adversity is not that much, because usually the game's pretty easy to come to. And so for Bradford to be able, and this is the start of his second real full season in the majors, and you're already, because of injuries, but you've tabbed him as number 2, and so far he's pitched like a number 2. That's just great. And as a staff so far, 4 quality starts already. That's second in the league. They're second in the league in WHIP. They're second in the league in ERA. They're 6th in the league in batting averages against. this has been the thing we all were worried about in the first part of the season. And so far, it's been the brightest thing. Now, will that last? We'll see. But hey, win every game you can right now until you get your arms back.
Yeah, and then of course it doesn't hurt to have Nathan Eovaldi either. He pitched a scoreless outing against the Rays in Tampa as well, and he'll start the home series against Oakland, which will start Tuesday. Again, the Rangers are on their 4-game series with Houston currently at home, part of the 7-game homestand. So they'll play games 3 and 4 of that on Sunday and Monday, and then Nathan Eovaldi will start on Tuesday against Oakland. Then again, staying on the topic of this Rangers starting rotation. John Gray, he's been shaky through 2 starts. I think Dane Dunning.
Gray, hang on. Sorry. Gray does that. Gray's got a big arm, but Gray also at times throws beach balls. And now we need more than 3 and 2 innings. We need 5 innings from him. But you're going to get stretches where he looks great, and then you're going to stretch. But I do want to go back to Eovaldi real quick, because I legitimately feel that if Eovaldi can stay healthy, and that's been his big issue, I legitimately think he is in the Cy Young race. He feels like it feels like he's ascended to that next level, and he was always kind of there. He already had a World Series. He's already pitched in big games, but it just feels like last year in the playoffs, everything finally came together for him. And it feels like, again, as long as he stays healthy, that we might be seeing Eovaldi in this last stage of his career be the best part of a very solid career.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at that postseason run last year, he became the first and only pitcher in Major League history to go 5-0 in 5 starts during an entire postseason run. Now, there are pitchers who have gone 5-0, as relievers and stuff, maybe closers. But as a starting pitcher, first to win 5 games in an entire postseason run. And he was phenomenal. And that's translated into this year as well. He's now 2-0 with a sub-2 ERA. I mean, he's phenomenal. I think he is going to be a Cy Young candidate. I think it's going to keep going. He's going to continue to be the ace of the starting rotation, which, again, has been solid, starting the season so far. Andrew Heaney, he had 7 strikeouts in his first start of the season as well. Dane Dunning was solid in his first start in Tampa. In that one, I think they kept him a little long because he ended up giving up 3 runs in that last inning. I think they kept him an inning too long there. But overall, man, the starting rotation, probably the biggest question going into the season. But like we've been talking about, it's been, at least to start, really solid so far.
Yeah, and I mean, we're not talking about playing teams that are expected to only win 70 games this year. You're talking about the Rays, the Astros, and then the Cubs. Cubs are going to be up and down, but Cubs have a really good offense. But again, let's go back to the bullpen. That's going to be the thing. As a Ranger fan, what do you remember most about last year? Of course, it's the World Series run and that bullpen through that run. But I'm not saying that was a fluke. But the bullpen caught fire at the right time. And I also think this is where you see Bruce Bochy's managing abilities of when to and when not to pitch certain people in key situations in the big games. But how will this bullpen do throughout the regular season? Because, hey, if that bullpen was just average last year, I don't think people realize the Rangers would have won 100 games.
I agree.
I agree. Statistically, just looking at the stats of if you take what they did, and they were bottom third of the league, maybe even bottom of the league in bullpen, and if you just bring that up to the average numbers of the 15th best bullpen in baseball, the Rangers would have won 100 games. And you were talking about a record. And I was just going to say, you can't really call the Ranger World Series a fluke when you go and look and see how many post-game or postseason records as a team and individuals, the records they broke were just amazingly, like upper echelon, old school numbers. And somebody says, well, yeah, but they play extra playoffs. Yeah, but let's remember in the first 2 playoffs, the Rangers swept. They played the minimum amount of games. So they only played 13 games in the American League playoffs before the World Series. That's old school. That's almost a regular old school when you just had the 1 wild card in a division. So you can't just say it's all bats. But anyway, my whole point is, at the end of the day, we're in a good stretch with the bullpen, but there are still some questions in that 8th and 9th spot.
Yeah, I agree completely. But they did really good yesterday in the 7-2 win over Houston. Again, like you said before, John Gray came out in the 4th inning. He pitched 3 2/3. Then the bullpen came out and pitched 5 1/3 inning of scoreless baseball, only giving up 2. I think they had 6 pitchers, and the reason they used that many is because Brock Burt came in to close an inning, so he only came in for 1 out. And then Josh Sborz came out with that injury.
Man, that's a concern. That's now again, if it's as long as it's nothing serious, and we're about to talk about serious arm injuries in baseball, as long as it's nothing serious, if you're going to have it, it's the best time to have it.
Yeah,
because you've got all summer to get him back and all that. But for short term, we got to hope it's nothing long because this bullpen is still really, really thin.
Yeah, and I think there's some, I guess somewhat hopeful news that came out of it. Bruce Bochy in the postgame show last night, when he was asked about Josh Sborz, he said something. I think he said it was right shoulder tightness, or not soreness, right shoulder soreness, and that he was brought out not necessarily as a precaution. What Bochy said was that he probably could have kept going.
Yeah.
But they took him out just in case it is worse than what they think it is.
Yeah, it's April. There's no need to blow out an arm. Speaking of that, I know you wanted to talk about the whole Tony Clark and ML Players Association. Man, that they came out swinging yesterday on something I don't understand why they feel like they need to swing at.
Yeah, and I can kind of see where they're coming from. So we're not even 2 weeks into the season at this point. We already have 9 pitchers at the major league level that are coming out with Tommy John injuries and are going to need surgery. So if that pace keeps up, oh my God, it would be the largest amount of cases in a single season ever. But when you look at their argument is that the pitch clock is a primary reason for these things happening. And I don't see how those correlate. So I put together this graphic right here, did a little bit of research. So these are players that have the total amount of players per season that have suffered Tommy John injury since 2019. So basically ever since the Rangers last season at Globe Life Park, these are the amount of players that have gone down with injuries. So let's take a look at the first 2, including the pitch clock era. Starting with 2023, 26 players went out with Tommy John injuries, of course, notably among them Jacob deGrom for the Rangers. But when you look at the season before 2022, no pitch clock, the same amount of players, the same amount of pitchers throughout the entire season with the same exact injury.
Well, and I thought so. Just to clear up everything. So Tony Clark yesterday again, it just weird. As you said, he came out talking about how the players, they feel the injuries are because of the pitch clock. And I thought MLB did a really good job of immediately answering him with numbers that showed that. Yeah, the Tommy John injury thing, it's been going on for longer than just the last 2 years. And your numbers are, notable in Major League. We're not even talking about the minor leagues.
Yeah, this is just majors.
Yeah, this is just majors. And they brought up a stat that showed that it was, this is in the minors. It had been going up like since 2016. The reason is, look at everybody on this list right here, whether it be Jacob deGrom, whether it be Noah Syndergaard, Chris Sale, Justin Verlander, all of them are basically hard throwers.
Exactly.
And we are in an era where everybody is throwing as hard as they can at all times. People want to talk about Nolan Ryan and all that and how long he lasted. Well, part of the reason he lasted so long is he would tell you is he knew that in the second and third inning, he didn't need to be hitting 100 miles an hour every pitch. He could get away with throwing it at 90%. And that saves wear and tear. And so all of these guys and it's not a knock. They're chunkers. That's great. Mm-hmm. But it's sometimes throw 60% and you're going to be good. And so my issue with all this is it's a weird thing to be taking a swing at because of everything. And I know Manfred is not well liked. I mean, by trade, all commissioners are not well liked, but Manfred, he is considered the enemy of all baseball simply because he made a comment about, the whole trophies and all. And I get it, but this is one of his good things. The pitch clock literally brought me back to fully watching baseball.
Yeah.
I've always talked about it. 2011 broke me. The Rangers losing the way they did, just it just cut hard. And then 2016, I'm starting to buy back in. and they're the number 1 seed. It looks like, okay, maybe and then Toronto part 2, and it's just, I'm out. I mean, I still watch, but I just, it was just hard to watch. But a part of it wasn't just that. It was the game had become boring. The game had become a 3.5 hour investment for 162 days out of a year. That just is too much. And then the funny thing is, it's not like it's cut the game down to an hour. It's still 2.5 hours, but that just feels so much easier. And it just blows my mind that the MLBPA are going to come after that. Like, that just makes no sense, because this everybody seems to like.
Yeah, and when you look at the numbers, during the 2022 season, I think that the average length of a game was like 3 hours and 20 minutes, something like that. And then it dropped to 2 hours and 39 minutes per game on average during the 2023 season. And I think that's a good thing. I really do. The argument that the MLB Players Association is making is that, oh, these pitchers are being rushed. Oh, they have to, they don't have as much time to get ready in between each pitch, and they're feeling rushed. But again, I think a better point is what you said. A lot of these guys on this list, they throw hard. DeGrom can throw up to 100. Syndergaard at his peak could throw nearly 100 or at 100.
You knew Noah Syndergaard was never going to last, because he not only did he throw hard, but he threw a slider hard, and that's it's bad enough wear and tear to throw a fastball hard, but when you start any kind of where you're breaking pitches, that's that used to be the Tommy John era. The people that were throwing fork balls, curve balls, where they were twisting instead of, there's 2 ways to throw a curve. You can throw it like that, or you can twist. All that used to be where your injuries were. Now it's in these guys who throw hard, but they throw violent. Yeah. And what I mean by violent is their body. It just, again, why did Nolan Ryan last so long? Everything about him was economical. His motion was economical. It was clean. It was smooth. I think that as pitchers adjust to this will make them better pitchers, because they're going to find a rhythm. And I know Nathan Eovaldi, I think it was talked about a little bit last year during the All-Star break, somebody asked him about it, and he was like, I'm fine with this. Like, I have found that once I get in that kind of rhythm, I just start, almost not thinking and just throwing, and I pitch better, because, so it's just a weird thing to go after. Now, I don't have a problem the fact that they did, this December, they cut it to 18 seconds with base runners on. I have no problem if you want to argue adding more of that. But yeah, this felt like something that, I don't know. I just think this is a bad argument. I mean, if studies really do come out and say that, I just don't. I haven't watched many games and thought, man, that pitcher looks like he's being rushed.
Yeah, and I agree. And again, it was quick research on my part. I only went back to 2019. But again, in all those seasons but 2019, there was more pitchers without a pitch clock that went out with Tommy John injuries than they have since the pitch clock was implemented last year. But again, I think the big reason, it might have been kind of an emotional argument started by the PA, just because, again, we're not even 2 weeks in, and already 9 players have gone out with this injury. And I think they're just, I don't know what threw them to the pitch clock to be the cause of that. Like I think you and I agree. I don't think there's any, because of the numbers over the past 5 years, I really don't think there's any correlation between the two, because you have the same amount, if not more, amount of the same injury in the seasons where there was no pitch clock whatsoever.
Well, and also, Tommy John, 5 years ago, it kind of became almost a running joke of, you might as well get your Tommy John out of the way. I mean, Tommy John sucks. It takes a while to come back, but I mean, high schoolers are getting Tommy John now. I mean, it's the violence of how you throw right now. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a weird thing to fight right now, or to argue about. Maybe this is posturing for something else. I'm one of those that, like, I get the Manfred hate, but honestly, everything he's done for the rules, pretty cool. I like the bigger base. We're seeing teams right now that already have 20 steals on the season.
Yeah, they're being more aggressive on the base paths, and I think that just makes it more exciting too.
That's one thing I wish Texas did do more. And Bruce Bochy is just not a running guy. He never has been. But like 2 years ago, before the big, and again, when you're a bad team, you tend to do more aggressive things anyway. But they stole a lot more. I wish they'd get back to that. But in saying that, they've already got like 13 stolen bases, or 9 stolen bases. I like that. Again, I'm an 80s kid as far as baseball. So I grew up with, the St. Louis Cardinals and Vince Coleman and Ozzie Smith and Willie McGee and small ball or carpet ball, as they called it. And I like homers, but I also like diversity in my offenses. And so I like the inning or the extra inning rule and extra innings in the regular season. Put a dude at second. Let's get the game over. I don't want, and I know they don't happen a ton, but man, a 14 inning game where nobody's doing anything, that's boring to me. Put a guy on second, at least it makes every at bat, for the rest of the game exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good thing. And again, the big chunk of the reason they implemented all those is because there was complaints. I don't know how much of it was from the players. It might have been mostly for the fans that a lot of the games on average were dragging out to nearly 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
And that's just for the game. You got to think about the full investment of a fan's day if they're going to go watch a 3.5 hour game. They have to drive and get to the stadium probably an hour early, find a parking spot and get to their seats, before the game even starts. And then they're going to have to fight their way out of traffic.
Yep.
So when the games are 3.5 hours, you add everything up, that's 6 hours. That's a good chunk of your day just to go watch a baseball game.
Well, especially until school is out and you're talking on a weekday. Like where I live in the Metroplex, it's about 45 minutes to the stadium, non-traffic. So add traffic on a normal Wednesday at 5 p.m. if I'm trying to go to a 7 p.m. start. It's, I'm leaving my house at 6 p.m. and I'm probably not going to be back till midnight, and then got to get up the next day and work. And so whether you like it or not, you've got to make changes. And that's the thing. I'm going to be talking with Jeff Fry, former Ranger, former Red Sox baseball player. He is very loud about the changes. And some of it's, get off my lawn. And me and him go at it on Facebook in good nature. But I disagree with some of his thoughts on that. And I'm going to actually have him on for a special Texas 2 Seam here in a couple of weeks where we're talking about his playing career and all that. But we want to talk about that because he's an old school and he's like, this is ruining the game. And my point is it's not ruining the game if it brings fans. You don't have a sport if you don't have fans. And I find it kind of funny that the same group that'll gripe about baseball not changing are also the same group that'll then say something about, well, the women's basketball league shouldn't work because it doesn't make money. Well, yeah, baseball could end up there if you don't make changes. Baseball, I'm a big believer that about every 30 years, baseball faces cultural issues that they've got to adjust to. Yeah. We're in one of those flashpoints right now. And if you don't adjust right, you could lose the youth. And if you lose the youth, it might be gone. It might be a niche sport after that. And nobody wants baseball to be a niche sport.
No, not at all. And then, like you said, mentioning the young generation, I'm part of that. Our attention span overall as a whole generation probably isn't the same as, the older generation that grew up watching baseball in like the 70s through the 90s and all that. It's just different. You have to adjust. And that's one of the things I learned at school studying broadcasting was you have to adjust or you have to know your audience and you have to adjust. With this generation, mine, Gen Z or whatever it's called, moving in now, they're going to be the ones going to all these games.
Yep.
And you got to create some sort of incentive and make the game more exciting for fans to want to come to the game. And I think all the rule changes they've implemented are going to be, I think they're going to save baseball. I really do. And it's going to make it to where you see an increase of fans. You see people my age, still being invested and bringing their kids one day. I think it only helps the game. Yeah, it's different. It completely changed the way baseball teams strategize, plan, play, everything. It's just different. But the only thing constant in this world is change. And you have to do that. You have to keep up with the times in order to keep the game alive. And I think they're taking steps right now to do that. I really think these rule changes, both last year and the few they implemented this year, I think they're going to save baseball.
Now, if baseball would just get rid of their stupid blackout stuff, that's the biggest thing, and Bally's and all that, and that's not really baseball's fault. That's Bally's buying it, and then the Sinclair Group thinking that they could jack up the prices, and cable carriers would take them anyway, and good for the cable carriers for calling their bluff. But yeah, I think that's the thing holding baseball back right now is being blackouts and then how they handle their highlight packages, because baseball doesn't let people on Twitter you've got, it's just weird. There's certain things, but that they need to still get out of the dark ages. But I do think the things on the field, I for the most part like them. And there's not really much else you can change on that. But I think baseball in 2 years has went from being in a kind of a bad spot to I think, and they need to change the All-Star. Go back to everybody wearing their own uniforms at the All-Star game.
Yes, I agree.
I know it's not going to happen because Nike wants to sell jerseys, but it's so boring now. I mean, so anybody knows me, you see I have all the helmets. I'm big into uniforms and helmets and all that. And the only reason I love the Pro Bowl was that everybody wore their own helmet, and that just looks cool on the field.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing in All-Star baseball. When I think of the All-Stars, I can still remember after a lot of rain, All-Star games in Wrigley Field, and Julio Franco comes up and he hits a hit, and it knocks in basically the winning run for the All-Stars. And I just remember how awesome it was that he was standing at first and you saw, his Texas Ranger uniform.
Yeah.
And it was just so cool because that was a national moment that the Rangers were being recognized in. And this was back in the day when that was very rare. And so, you just get the uniforms back. I know they won't, but it sucks.
It was the same deal for me too. Exactly. Whenever I was a kid, I can't remember exactly what year it was, but when Michael Young was in the All-Star game and he had just a white jersey with Texas across, it's not at least when I was a kid, when the Rangers were struggling, it didn't happen very often. So I think that's a great point. I think for the All-Star game, they do need to bring that back. Just have all the, depending on what stadium they're at, if they're at an American League stadium, if American League team is hosting, have all the American League teams wear their home white uniform.
That's how it used to be. And then the road,
exactly.
But again, it'll never happen because of Nike can sell those All-Star uniforms.
Yeah. And that's another topic of discussion that's been amongst, Ranger MLB pundits and fans, is how different the uniforms overall look this year and how the text names on the back are smaller. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, they're terrible. Now, I will say this, though. So a lot of people, I guess, have had really bad luck with Fanatics, and when they buy stuff, it's all weird. I haven't bought a ton, but I have bought stuff from Fanatics, and I've been lucky. They've all been pretty. Yeah, they've all been pretty normal.
Yeah,
but yeah, the uniforms look cheap. You can see through them. I had noticed. I was laughing at that the other day. They were, in fact, I think it was Josh Young. He was at first, and I just got fixated on the fact that how easily you could see his pockets. Like through his pockets, like Jesus Christ, fix that. But the worst I think is the name on the back. It just looks really bad. Yeah. It looks really cheap. Again, baseball uniforms, there's something just inherently the old school, the way they're, still got buttons and they still do a belt, but it all works. But again, we can bitch about that all we want, but none of that's going to change because Fanatics and Nike, it was like a 5-year deal. So they're going to be around forever. But what's sad is, and I'm not even a big fan of them, but the Rangers couldn't even wear their City Connects on Friday because they haven't even got them yet. Like that is just how does a major company not have all the uniforms out? Like you knew when the season started, right? This isn't Little League where, hey, the date may change. No, we kind of knew last year when the season would start. And so again, that kind of stuff just looks really bad.
Yeah, it's so stupid. I agree. And I liked the old uniforms too. What company even made the old uniforms with the giant blocky letters and stuff like that?
That was Majestic, and they're not around anymore, I think. I think they got bought out. I think that's what it is. But anyway, do you want to answer questions before we?
Oh, yeah. We can. Let's see. So again, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we do have our partnership with the Texas Rangers Fans Only Facebook page. And we'll answer some questions right here on the Texas Two-Scene Podcast, part of Outdrink the Coverage on L4 Media. Again, my name is Ryan Fox, and joining alongside me today is Terry Bennett. And let's go ahead and look at these fan questions. The first one, these are actually going to be both from Aaron on Texas Rangers Fan Only. The first one, we talked about it earlier. If Josh Boers is placed on the IL, who gets the call-up? And for me, I think it would either be Grant Anderson, because he's had a solid, season in the minors so far, 2 starts, hasn't given up a run. And you look at Mark Church, who hasn't made his major league debut yet, but he had a really solid spring, and he hasn't given up a run through 2 appearances at AAA as well. So I think for me, if Josh Sborz, again, we talked about it earlier, Bochy said something. It might have been more of a preventative deal with the shoulder soreness taking him out early. But it could be, again, like with Young, could be worse than initially expected. And if Sborz does go on the injured list, I think it would either be Mark Church or Grant Anderson. What do you think, Terry?
I'm trying to think of his name. It depends on where Michael Orisian is. The guy that they signed off from the Phillies, where he's kind of ramping up. He gets signed late and all that. I think it depends on where he's at. And also it just depends on where Church and Anderson are on their days, because again, assuming if he goes down for a week or two, assuming it's nothing major, you're just needing some arms. You're going to shift a couple in the pen, and you just might need a guy who only is going to be there if you need a long relief. And so you might not want to bring a Church up because you want him to find a rhythm, because you might need him later on in the season. Again, if you're going to have these type of injuries, this is the best time to have it. You have time to stretch your guys out. But yeah, I think it all depends on where Lorenzen is. If he's ready, I think and he might even slide into the rotation, and maybe you kick Gray out for a couple weeks and put him in long relief. Again, the thing that the Rangers lack, it's not that the talent in the pitching's not there. It's just there's no depth right now until DeGrom, until Scherzer, until what's his name that they signed that came from, he already had Tommy John. Until they're back, the depth, you're going to be dancing with depth all the first part of the season. And there's going to be times where you're going to have to take losses because you just don't have the arms. And especially if Leclerc kind of keeps doing what he's doing. And look, let's just accept this right now. That's how Jose pitches. He's always going to be what he throws, especially that slider, that when it's getting people swinging, it's one of the best pitches in baseball. But it's going to go stretches where people are laying off of it, and he's always going to dance with control issues. He's always going to dance with, that just doesn't magically go away. I mean, this dude you got to remember, this guy was on the last playoff team for the Rangers, the 2016. This isn't, I still think we all, because he looks young, I think we all still think of him as, he's just a couple. No, he is now coming up on being a 9-year major league pitcher in the majors. This is who he is. So you're going to have to live and die with that. I'm fine with that. You just accept it. Sometimes you're going to lose a couple games because of it.
Yeah, and with Leclerc, I think he's at his best when he attacks the batters as well. I think a lot of that, especially – so I went to the game last Sunday when they played Chicago. He came in the 9th inning, had 3 walks. I think he was trying to get guys to chase in that one. It might have been a control issue as well. That could have been the case. But I think in some cases, especially with his off-speed pitches – he was trying to get guys to chase. Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm going to say that's part of his game, though. Again, that his slider, you've got 2 types of sliders. You got sliders that break in zone, sliders that break out. His breaks out. And I agree, though. When he's on, watch when he's on, especially when it's the right-handers. It'll be fastball in, slider out, and he'll get them every time. When he's struggling, that fastball isn't forcing them to respect the slider. And you're right, Chicago. He was trying to dance. He was trying to hit the corners. That fastball is good enough at 97 with movement. Just pipe it. Pipe it, because it's gonna move in on the hands. And again, so when he throws that slider to the right hands and it dives at that last moment, they're gonna bite it every time. They're gonna go for it. And you saw that. And that's another reason why he actually works in high-pressure situations, because batters are usually more aggressive in high-pressure situations, and that's when that pitch gets really tantalizing. But, yeah, fans, you just got that. That's who he is at this point. So crying about it ain't going to help. I mean, he's a control issue guy, but that doesn't mean he can't still be good.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good segue into our next question, also by Aaron over the Texas Rangers Fans Only Facebook page. Will Leclerc settle into his closer role, or will it end up becoming a save by committee again? Now, again, I think this closing spot is still Leclerc's to lose, especially when you look at how he's pitched for them, especially during the playoffs last year. And you don't have a guy like Will Smith anymore, a guy who was an established closer before he got to Texas. So I think it's still Leclerc's to lose. but it could very well be a save by committee again. I just don't know who else they would put in that closing role if potentially needed. Well, what do you think, Terry?
I think with Bruce Bochy, I don't really care about who's the closer because in April, because that doesn't, I mean, Bochy, and I think, yes, part of it's the money, but there's a reason why they didn't go after Josh Hader, is like everybody thought.
Yeah.
I don't think Bruce Bochy cares to have that type of closer. I think what makes him good in the playoffs is the fact that, and again, you didn't have a Will Smith this year, but like last year, who were you going to get, Leclerc, Sports, or Will Smith? You caused doubt in the other dugout. So I don't think Leclerc will settle into his closer role, because I don't think Bochy feels the need to go, you're my closer all the time. I think it's, you're my closer till you have some issues, then we'll back you out. We'll put somebody else in. We'll rotate you back in down the road. So I'm not worried about Leclerc. Again, he's who he's going to be. He's going to kind of always be a little wild. You take the good, you take the bad. You take them both, you there, you have the different strokes. That's a TV show right there, folks. But yeah, I think I don't think he's going to be comfortable in it, because I don't think Bruce Bochy wants him to be comfortable in it.
Yeah, and that's what makes Bruce Bochy such a great manager. Like he has an unbelievably good feel for the game.
Yep.
He knows which pitchers are on, when they're on, how they are against righties or lefties, or the history between this particular batter, whatever the case may be. He just has an unbelievable feel for the game. And that's something we talked a little bit last week in the show, how there's a difference between managers that have just a feel for the game, they go with the flow of the game, and ones that are like strictly analytical. I mean, that's something that when you look at last year with the Toronto Blue Jays, they lost their potential playoff spot solely based on an analytical decision.
Yep.
They took out a pitcher that was pitching phenomenal, and it was his first inning. I think it was the 7th or 8th inning of the game. He'd been pitching phenomenal all game long, and then he had 2 batters on, but there was 2 outs, and instead of letting him get the final out or giving him a chance to, they brought in a guy that had the reason for it. The pitcher they took out that had been dealing, I can't remember his name, was struggling overall in the season against left-handed batters.
Yeah.
So they took him out and brought in a relief pitcher who had success against left-handed batters, at least more so than the starting pitcher. And that relief pitcher came in and blew the lead. And I think that's what makes Bruce Bochy such a good manager, is that, he might look at analytics sometimes, maybe it goes into his game plan sometimes, but I think what makes him special and is a good point for your argument of how he manages is that he doesn't need to have a secure closer like you're the guy, because he knows each of his pitchers better than anyone. He knows when they're good, how, at that point in the season, how they've been dealing, how they are against particular batters, whether they're right, left, or whoever, and he knows when to put them in at the right time. And I think that's a good point about this Leclerc. He doesn't have to settle in, because Bochy knows where to put guys and when to put them in.
And don't be surprised. Will Smith went to the Royals. Do not be surprised if, when the Royals start to fall out of contention, he's a prime guy to see the Rangers go back and get.
Yeah,
if they feel the need to, and just to add depth to that bullpen. And I want to say this to close out my part with Bruce Bochy. I was 100% happy when they hired him.
Me too.
I didn't really truly understand, though, the ability that he has to stay even keel, to where go pull up press conferences after a hot streak and go pull up press conferences after a bad stretch, put them together. Without context, you won't know the difference.
You can't tell the difference. That's right.
He just knows it's a long season. He doesn't freak out. Hey, y'all won, 18 out of 20. That's great. Hey, y'all have lost 18 out of 20. That sucks. Same tone, because he knows, hey, we're gonna be fine in the long run. And the way, I sometimes feel that gets overrated, managerial moves, but the way he handled that bullpen in the playoffs, and let's be honest, it really, really helped that the offense came alive in those first 2 series, that we never really had to get deep into the bullpen against the Rays or against the Orioles. That helped too. Again, that's why everything works together, folks. pitching helps batting, batting helps pitching. And so that helped. But yeah, the way he does a bullpen, I trust if he literally named you the starter, I'm like, okay, he or closer. All right, well, he knows what he's doing, obviously. I mean, he throws grapefruits, but apparently he's going to get them out. That's how much I trust him.
Yeah, and I agree completely. And another side note, we talked about during the Rangers postseason run, the records they broke. And one of those records was the 11-0 on the road during the postseason. And I'm sure you saw them as well when the Rangers unveiled their World Series rings. Underneath the pendant, like inside the ring, it had the Road Warriors 11-0, and it was the R from the Rays, the O from the Orioles, the A from the Astros, and then the D from the Diamondbacks. I thought that was really freaking cool.
I did like the fact, too, that the A for the Astros was also very generic. It didn't quite look like the Astro A. Yeah, some people, it was weird. Some people were like, oh, you're putting your opponents on your ring. But in all sports, a lot of times the championship ring will have, like I know one of the Cowboys has both the Cowboy and the Buffalo helmet. That's not that rare. I do think, I'm not a big believer in the faith and things like that, but it is very odd that the year that the Rangers break a record that had been, nobody even thought was possible, it literally spells out road. That's one of those creepy things about life that just sometimes matches up perfectly. But yeah, by the way, those are some darn pretty rings.
Yeah, they are gorgeous. Go check them out. They're on the Texas Rangers Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever social media handles you use. They revealed them last week, and they're gorgeous, unbelievable. Especially, I just love the little Road Warriors thing inside the ring. I thought that was awesome. It is great. And again, thank you for tuning in. We're right here on Texas 2 Scene, part of Outdrink the Coverage on L4 Media. I'd like to close the show today looking ahead at the Astros series. But before we get into that, I want to talk about Ronel Blanco. He pitched the first no-hitter of the 2024 MLB season, and the Astros 10-0 win over the Toronto Blue Jays last week. And I just want to talk about the story that led up to him. He was signed by the Astros at age 22. He's 30 now for $5,000. And in the Dominican Republic, living with his mother, he washed cars in order to support him and his mother back at home. And during this past spring training, he made some starts for the Astros either last year or the year before, but he didn't make the final opening day roster for the Astros until the last day of spring training, the same day that his first daughter was born. And I thought that was really cool. And then just a couple days later, in his first start of the season, his 8th career start, by the way, he threw a no-hitter against the Blue Jays. And I thought that was awesome. He's tied for Vita Blue for 4th all-time in the quickest amount of games started before throwing his first ever no-hitter. It was an awesome deal. Again, we always poke fun about the Astros rivalry and stuff, but I thought just with the story and just the week, was there anyone who had a better week last week than Ronel Blanco pitching a no-hitter and having making a major league roster and having the birth of his first daughter?
And the crazy thing is it would not shock me that by July he's not even a starter anymore. Because he's a 5th guy. And this is what I honestly thought the Astros had gotten things together because the Blue Jays still have a formidable lineup.
Yeah,
and they went in a 3-game series and held them to 1 run. Again, or 2 runs. Excuse me. The weird thing about the Astros is they've lost 7, they've won 2, but in those 2 they've pitched shutouts. So. Officially, the Astros are undefeated when they hold the opposing team to 0 runs this year. But I think it's a great story, and it was not a fluke no-hitter. He went out and dominated. He was aggressive. 7 strikeouts, I think it was. I think he walked 2. Yeah. I think he only had a 3-ball count 5 times in the game. Just a great great performance. And again, it makes it even more impressive what the Rangers have done against this staff the first 2 games, especially last night, because of those 7 runs. A lot of that was just clawing and clawing for it. And by the way, the Rangers are on a crazy streak right now, and they did this early last year, and then they kind of faded. But with 2 outs against the Astros in game 1, all the runs came on 2 outs. That was happening in the ALCS. Remember, that's exactly. I think it it wasn't it was game 3 or game 2. I think it was game 2 because when they won, I think all their runs were on 2 outs. I dare to say the Rangers might be in the Astros' head right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially with how, again, with the Astros, it's especially impressive because, again, we talked about before how much they've dominated when they come to Arlington and play, especially since this new stadium opened. But I think not winning a single home game, and they've been struggling at home lately overall, not just taking the ALCS last year.
They have not won a home game. Oh, no, I'm sorry. They played Toronto at home. So until they beat Toronto, they had not won a home game since the middle of August last year.
That's unbelievable with the amount of success they've had over this dynastic run in Houston. They've had a lot of their success at Minute Maid Park, and just to see them struggle as late, it's just unbelievable to see, and it's a big reason why they're tied with the Athletics for last place in the AL West right now is because of they just can't win at home. I mean, they opened the season by getting swept in a 4-game series against the Yankees. And
in cruel ways, too. They led in every game. Their bullpen, like you said, Josh Hader's already blown a save. It just and I still contend the Astros will be fine, but the Astros they've got to figure some things out.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, a quick look at the AL West standings as of Sunday, April 7th, when we're recording this. The Rangers 6-2 atop the AL West. The Angels, how about the Angels? 5-3, second place in the AL West again, early in the season. Don't want to overhype. And again, you look at the team. I'm sorry, go ahead.
When we talked on our happy hour, I told you, watch out for the Angels. Ron Washington, that guy just knows how to get the most out of everybody. And I think people act like, because the joke the last couple of years were, Mike Trout hit a home run and Ohtani hit a home run and the Angels lost 10-2. That's not as quite that's because people like Anthony Rendon, and I know people are, giving him a hard time for things he said, but that's because people like him weren't playing up to their ability. But the lineup was solid and should be better, and at least early. And again, this is way early. Hell, Pittsburgh is doing what they do every year now. They look good for a couple weeks, but the pitching for the Angels so far, it's not been great, but it's been what they needed. They're 13th in WHIP, which that's not great. But again, last year I think they were 27th in WHIP. And we talk about the bullpen for the Rangers. Just moving up to average can make your team way better. And again, very early, but I like to see it. I want the Angels to be competitive.
I do too, and especially with Ron Washington taking over there. They lost 2 of 3, but they took the last match in Baltimore, and then they swept the Miami Marlins in Miami. But that Miami team
started out bad.
They don't have a win yet. They're 0-9 going into Sunday afternoon, and then they have a 3-game series right now against Boston at home, and they've split it so far. The rubber match will be on Sunday afternoon, and if they're able to get that series out of a highly promising Boston Red Sox team, that would be huge for Ron Washington and company.
No, I agree. That whole East, by the way, NL East is just terrible.
Yeah.
Philly is second at 4, and again early, but I mean, there's a reason why the Braves and the Phillies are World Series threats. Mm-hmm. It's because part of it is they're great, but also they don't have to battle in that division like those. They're going to both make the playoffs. Now, one of them you got to worry about the wild card, but man, the Mets are terrible, the Nationals are terrible, and the Marlins, who everybody thought last year had turned the corner, at least now have started out terrible. And 0-9, you can't. The old saying is you can't win a pennant in April, but you sure can lose one.
Yeah.
You get too much further. They're already 6 games out of first place. I mean, again, long season, but that's a grind right there in of itself.
Yeah, that's already a huge hole to climb out of. And then going back to the AL West, I think a team, aside from the Astros, that's kind of disappointed so far is Seattle.
Yeah,
they're sitting at 4-5. They split a 4-game home series with that Boston team, but then they dropped 2 of 3 at home against Cleveland, and now they're in Milwaukee. They've split the first 2 games of that 3-game series, and then now they're looking, they might lose that series as well and fall to 4-6 to start the season. That's a team that a lot of people talked about as potentially the favorite to win the AL West. Now, again, I think at the end of the day, I think it'll be a 3-horse race between Texas, Seattle, and Houston at the end of the day. But again, who knows with the Angels? They're starting off a lot better than people anticipated, and the Astros starting a lot worse. But again, I think they'll be fine. But again, I'm kind of surprised with the Mariners how they've only started off 4-5, and they might start 4-6, but at best they would start 500 through the first 10 games.
Well, they don't hit. They have maybe the best starting rotation in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that is consistently it takes a starting rotation 2 to 3 starts to find their groove.
Mm-hmm.
Perfectly fine with that. They've got Toronto coming up after this, and they've got the Cubs, and so they're going to hit a stretch where it's Toronto, who we don't know what Toronto's going to be this year. The Cubs, Cincinnati, Colorado, and then they'll get Texas in April. So they've got plenty of time to get it right. But yeah, you're going to see them start slow. I'm more concerned about them after the All-Star break, as long as their arms are healthy. But again, this is why Texas, with all the starting issues that they have with their rotation, get as much up as you can now, so that if in June some of these, the Dunnings and the Grays and all them, if the innings start to kind of wear them down,
mm-hmm.
you can absorb those losses. That's the thing people know. I talked about last year. Yeah, the Rangers had a couple really terrible losing streaks, including August. But people forget the Astros were collapsing at the same time. That's why Rangers were able to stay in the race. But they also had a lot of great win streaks. And that goes back to what we talked about, Bochy being able to stay affable and stay level-headed. The Rangers are going to win 5 in a row, and they're going to lose 5 in a row. That happens. But get as many wins now while everybody else is kind of scuffling.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be the key part this early in the season for the Rangers to do just that. And again, let's close the show today right here on Texas 2 Scene, part of Out During the Coverage on L4 Media. Let's talk about this Houston series. Again, they played 2 of the 4 games, and the Rangers took game 1 by a score of 10-2 off a gem thrown by Cody Bradford, and then winning 7-2 on a Saturday night. John Gray again. Only pitching 3 1/3 inning, but 3 2/3, but then the relief pitching coming in and pitching 5 1/3 scoreless innings, only giving up 2 hits by using 6 pitchers in the process as well. Now let's look ahead to Sunday and Monday. I think in both cases, at least they're on an even level playing field as far as the pitching matchup is concerned. As Sunday afternoon, we have Dane Dunning and the aforementioned Ronel Blanco on Sunday. Monday, it might be slightly tilted in Houston's favor. It'll be a battle of lefties between Andrew Heaney and Framber Valdez. I think
pitched well in his loss.
Yeah, and Andrew Heaney, he had 7 strikeouts, and then Framber Valdez has started solid as well. But I think the Rangers will take at least one of the next 2 games and take the series. I wouldn't be surprised if they swept it. I wouldn't be surprised if they dropped the next 2. But what do you think of the next 2 games in this 4-game series against Houston?
Again, going into a 4-game with who you think is going to be your closest rival, you want to split, but that's shifted when you take the first 2, and especially how you've taken the first 2.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like you. I don't think they sweep the Astros. The Astros are still good. I think they take at least 1, and if they do, then coming in on Tuesdays, the Athletics. That's a prime stretch to really start this season off where you're 10-3. Something like that. And it just feels like, and it doesn't have to happen, but it just always feels like historically when the Rangers have started well, that's every year they've made the playoffs. It feels like, last year, the sweep of the Phillies, it just kind of set a precedence for the rest of the year. But yeah, I'm curious to see how Blanco pitches today. I would not be shocked if he comes back to more of what he is, which is still a solid pitcher. And I don't like 4 games over Friday to Monday. I think 4 games should always be Thursday to Sunday. It just feels weird. Because it kind of alters. Sunday is usually we're going to sit guys day. Well, you're right in the middle of a 4-game. Do you want to sit them now or do you sit them Monday? It's the little things like that why I don't like it. But I think they take 1 out of the 2, and then let's see what they do against the Athletics.
Absolutely. Well, absolutely great show. Thanks again for joining us, Terry, right here on Texas 2 Scene, part of Out During the Coverage on L4 Media.
By the way, hang on. Monday night, this Monday, tomorrow night, every other Monday, we do happy hour here at Out During the Coverage. That's where intern Noah and I get on, and we just kind of talk about all the sports over the last couple of weeks and some movie stuff and pop culture, have a drink. You'll be joining us to talk a little bit of this, too. We'll be able to talk a little bit more, and we'll also be talking the college basketball championships. It's funny. Unplanned,
every other week, every other Monday when it's time to do happy hour, it seems like something big is going on or something major has happened. So check that out at on our YouTube at L4 Media Company. Find it on Facebook, Outdrink the Coverage, and it'll be, once we go live, you'll be able to see the live button. Just click play and watch.
And the live streams, they're on Facebook, YouTube. I think they're on Twitter as well.
They're on everything. It's like 9. It even goes to my old YouTube. That's just me. It's the only thing I have is those. So just type in Outdrink the Coverage happy hour, and you'll probably be able to find us.
Awesome. And again, those are every other Monday night, including Monday night, April 8th. Be sure to tune in that on Outdrink the Coverage. And again, want to give one more shout out to our sponsor, Car Motor Company in downtown Cleburne. Again, they're on the ticker below and the commercial as well. You can find them 302 South Caddo in downtown Cleburne. Give them a call, 817-666-1111, or online at www.txcar.com. That's www.txkar.com. And that's it here on the Texas Two Seam Podcast, part of Outdrink the Coverage on L4 Media. Terry Bennett, again, thank you for joining us, and we will see you throughout the season on Texas Two Seam and on Outdrink the Coverage every other Monday during the off season as well. Thanks again for joining us, man.
No problem.
All right. Thank you. And thank you again for tuning in to the Texas Two Seam Podcast. We'll see you next week as we recap the headlines around Major League Baseball with an emphasis on the defending World Series champion Texas Rangers. We will see you next week.